Friday the 13th. Hate, Kill, Repeat. Chapter 18. The FBI's new captive stared morosely out into the darkness, as if willing his wife's face to appear, somewhere out there in its depths. He wrung his hands together as best he could in the cuffs. Damler had decided to ignore his prisoner for a while. No longer holding Thawn at gunpoint, he was chatting to Van Stat, a somewhat one-sided conversation. While Damler felt bloated with the triumph of finding Norwood, his colleague was stony-faced. "Once we've dumped this jerk," he said, "would you let me buy you dinner?" Van Stat turned her head slightly in his direction. That expression, he thought, could wither a dick at 40 paces. Yet her frosty veneer was all part and parcel of the attraction. He wondered if they would ever get it on. Earlier that night, he had thought that the pair of them had reached a kind of understanding. They had been flirting, hadn't they? Or was it just him? He had lost all sense of perspective. He suddenly felt impotent and stupid. Gripping his gun, he swung back to Thawn. "What's to stop me from killing you now?" Thawn raised an unimpressed eyebrow. It was Van Stat who spoke. "Ed, if you don't stop this, I swear I'll have to report you." Damler bared his teeth. Why couldn't she get the message? This was unorthodox, sure, but it was about saving lives. They had to find Norwood's wife, Penelope, before she continued the couple's work. "Nothing," he told Thawn, answering his own question. "There's nothing to stop me." "Oh, really?" said Thawn. "I had assumed the question was rhetorical." Van Stat opened her mouth, but Damler raised a finger before she could speak. She scowled at the road, which was now flanked by huge fields. "I'll shoot you and say you tried to resist arrest," smiled Damler. Thawns shrugged. "Then you'd never find out why we did it. What's your name again? Ed?" "Never mind what my fucking name is. All you need to know is that I'm the guy who's going to drastically redecorate the back of this car, unless you tell me where your murdering bitch of a wife is." Thawne tugged furiously at his bonds. Damler realized he had hit a sensitive area, but wasn't sure why. "You really want to know, Mr. Big Shot?" asked Thawne, looking even more feral than when they had picked him up. "I'd like nothing in the world, in the whole wide world, than to know what happened to her. She's dead." Van Stat issued a gasp. Damler frowned at her. "Really, Norwood? How did she die?" he asked. Thawn's voice vibrated as he began the sentence. "She was murdered by Jason Voorhees." Damler laughed uproariously, slapping the butt of his gun against the head of his seat. Thawne studied him with contempt. Damler's face was red. He wiped his eyes. "Jason Voorhees! Now, I had a feeling the two of you would come up here looking for that myth. But let's get this straight. You're saying that not only did you find Jason, but he killed your wife." Thawne nodded gravely. "That's right," he said, eyes locked with Damler's. "He killed her. And you too will die. Very soon." Damler blinked. He cupped his free hand behind one ear. Excuse me, I didn't catch that." Thawne went back to staring out of the window. Tom replaced the handset with a sigh. He had tried a scam with the switchboard, pretending to be an old friend of Norwood and Penelope's. It was their wedding anniversary, he had told the receptionist, and he wanted to have a bottle of champagne delivered to the room. Did she have any guests by those names? She didn't. He had failed miserably. "Of course," he said, looking across at Halo, who was still pacing relentlessly around the suite's living area. "They'd hardly stay here under their real names, would they? I say we call the cops." Halo thought about this for a full lap of the suite, then threw her hands up. "I guess we have to." Less than a minute later, Tom was talking to another receptionist, this time at the local sheriff's department. He told her the bare essentials. His friend had been attacked and her sister was missing. And no, they didn't have Shelley Harlan's phone number, or even the damn address. He slammed the phone down. Behind him, Halo awaited the news. "Done. They're coming over. Why don't you clean up a little?" In his time, Ed Damler had shot 5 men dead, wounded 2. FBI agents tended to kill fewer than street beat cops, simply because feds were less hands-on. The FBI figured out a serial killer or killer's profile, gave the local police an outline of their man. It almost always was a man, which was why Penelope's involvement here intrigued him. And then they'd stand back with their arms folded, like spectators at a firework display. Yet Damler always seized any opportunity to get in there, to get his hands dirty, use his gun if necessary. Perhaps he really did have a death wish. Was he really going to make the total 6? He considered this as he peered along the barrel at Norwood's loathsome face. "You really want to do it, don't you?" said Thawn, eyes twinkling, as if some new energy was flowing through him. "No, Ed doesn't," said Van Stat. "Do you, Ed?" "No, I don't," said Damler insincerely. "I really don't. But I might have to, Mr. Preacher Man, if you don't tell me the truth about Penelope. Jason Voorhees my fucking ass." "It's the truth. We did go looking for Jason, but we made a grave error. He killed her, and almost killed me too." Daimler's eyes narrowed. For a moment he considered it. What if Thawn was telling the truth? In an instant, Thawn's face became a shocked mask. He was staring past Damler, out through the car windshield. It's him," he breathed hoarsely. "It's—" Damler was about to congratulate Thawn on his performance when his colleague yelled, "Whoa!" Damler followed Thawn's line of sight in time to see that the car was speeding directly for a giant of a man, or a thing, standing in the middle of the road. The entire bathroom was spotless, shining white. Halo emerged from the glass shower cubicle with a fresh towel wrapped around her, the tiles cool beneath her feet. Doing something so superficial as bathing had been difficult, but it undeniably felt great. As she stood under the warm jetting water, it had been hard to register that something nice was actually happening to her. She had washed the blood from her body, then tenderly held her abdomen for a while, wondering how her unborn had fared amid all this madness. She climbed back into the same clothes which she had left piled up on the toilet seat. It made washing seem a little pointless, but she didn't have much choice. As she pulled each garment on, her muscles resisted painfully. She also noticed just how many holes and rips her clothing had accrued. Outside in the living area, Tom was knocking back another cup of coffee. "Need to sober up," he said, as if it needed explanation. Then he looked at her strangely. "You look—" He paused, breaking eye contact, as if he knew his thoughts were inappropriate. "Even better." An awkward silence descended on the room. "How long will the cops be?" she finally asked, renewing her pacing routine. "It's a small town," shrugged Tom, replacing his empty cup on the table. "Probably about 5-10 minutes." Van Stat swore at the top of her lungs as she violently swerved the Lincoln. Damler shielded his face with both hands, his gun's muzzle pushed against the vehicle's roof. Thawne gazed hungrily out at the beast that slaughtered his wife. Jason Voorhees didn't move a muscle. Covered in blood, vomit, and grime, he resembled nothing so much as a huge scarecrow that had been somehow transplanted from field to road. The Lincoln missed Jason's left side by what looked like an inch, thundering on past him. "Who the fuck was that?" roared Damler. "What was that mask?" He scowled at Thawn. "And don't say it was Jason Voorhees, you prick." Thawn had twisted around in his seat and was staring through the back window, watching the giant get smaller and smaller. "Are you okay?" Damler asked Van Stat. She nodded despite looking winded. Thawn began thrashing around, yanking at the cuffs, unhinged. "You have to let me out of here. I have to go back and take my revenge." Damler stared at the man, shocked to realize that Thawn was starting to convince him. He didn't sound as though he was trying to tell him and Van Stat what to do. The man was pleading. "You can lock me up forever afterwards," Thawn persisted, "but please, take me back there and give me the knife. Otherwise I'll never rest." Damler peered past Thawn's frantically moving head, back along the road. Whoever they had narrowly missed was long gone. He gritted his teeth. "Well, Norwood, old friend, perhaps you don't deserve to rest. Not for what you've done." Thawne was about to retaliate when the car lurched, one corner lowered, bumping against the ground. Damler gripped the back of his seat, looking at Van Stat for answers. "Oh, great," she said as they slowed. "We got ourselves a flat." Halo still didn't know what to say to the man who was attempting to bring some sanity to her ordeal. He was good-looking, she knew that much, and there was an instant bond between them. She could feel it and was unusually confident that he felt it too. Yet the timing couldn't possibly have been worse. It was so wrong, in fact, that she was consciously repressing her attraction to this guy, almost to the point of being cold toward him. Perched awkwardly on the air conditioning unit, over by one of the big windows, she decided to soften a tad, at least show some interest in him. "So, I guess you lost your job, huh, Tom?" Over on the sofa, Tom clutched his forehead, eyes shut. "Too much damn caffeine," he murmured. Yeah, I lost my job. But who knows, it could be the best thing that ever happened to me." "Sure looked that way. Didn't think much of your friends in the bar there." "So, how you feeling?" he asked. She shrugged. "I'm breathing. Hopefully. So's my baby." Tom's eyes doubled in size. "You're pregnant?" Halo laughed grimly and lightly patted her belly. "Well, I was this morning. Hard to tell after all the shit we've been through. But I think the little guy's all right." "You know the gender?" "Nah," said Halo. "Just a feeling." She flashed him a smile much brighter than she felt. "I think your girlfriend was pretty pissed at you." "She's not my girlfriend anymore, like I told her." Just making sure, Halo told herself. But why was she thinking like this? Still human, came her own answer. I'm still human, thank God. She casually glanced down through the window. "Hey, looks like the cops have shown up." All those stories down at the ground level, a swirling red light eased its way into the premises. It had come as no surprise to Damler that he was the only agent here who knew how to change a tire. Women were so keen on equality, he considered, until it came to practical, greasy-fingered concerns. Then, they were more than happy to sit back and let men take over. The Lincoln had rolled to a lazy halt, halfway along a road which dissolved into the night, both east and west. Tall cornfields barricaded them in. These made Damler nervous. If Thawn were to escape, he'd have ample cover in which to lose himself. But Thawn was here to stay, Damler told himself. He was still handcuffed to the back seat. Damler had checked only a few minutes ago, before dealing with this will. To keep himself entertained out in the cool night air, Damler opened a back door so he could talk to Thawn while he worked. Van Stat remained silent in the driver's seat. She had clearly decided to wash her hands of the whole affair, which pleased Damler. His antagonistic techniques would be a whole lot more effective without her bleeding. The good-fed, bad-fed routine could only go so far. "You know how to change a tire, friend?" he casually asked Thawn while pumping the jack with his foot. The spare wheel sat on the ground beside him. "Or is that beneath a highfalutin intellectual like yourself?" Thawn sniffed. "Thought so," grinned Damler. "What was it you taught as a teacher again? Back in Ohio? Anything to do with religion by any chance?" Thawn shifted in the back seat, presenting his back to Damler. The agent took his foot off the jack, gripping the butt of his gun tightly. He leaned into the car and rapped it hard on the nape of Thawn's neck. "Ah!" The prisoner's natural urge was to rub the point of impact, but his cuffs made this impossible. "You're a... Come on, Norwood, say it. Call me a motherfucker, say it. You may as well. You're a fucking hypocrite. Think you're on the moral high ground? What about murder, huh?" Norwood shook his head, still dazed by the blow. "What I want to know," continued Damler, "is whether you know you're being a hypocritical piece of shit, or whether it's a blind spot in your moral fiber. These are the little things that interest me, the kinds of details that will help me hone that bestseller one of these fine days." "You go fuck yourself," spat Thawn. "Yes," said Damler triumphantly. "That's more like it. That's the spirit." He banged his palm against the Lincoln's bodywork and began to pump the jack in earnest. "So, are you going to stick to your story about Penelope being dead, and that being Jason Voorhees we just saw on the road?" Thawn nodded. "I most certainly am. If I were you, Eddie, I'd watch your back." Damler laughed off the suggestion. Seconds later, when Thawn was looking elsewhere, he stole a look back along the road. The dark surface showed no signs of movement. although it was hard to tell once the blackness took over. Corn cobs caught his attention as they drifted lightly on their stalks. Damler felt as though he was being watched. His eyes darted from one stalk to another, and in between. Jesus, was that a footstep behind him? After a while, he shrugged off his paranoia. The sooner he changed this will, the sooner they'd have Norwood Thawn safely under lock and key. Tyrone Fenton allowed a relieved sigh to whistle out from the gap in his front teeth as he watched his boss walk off across the gravel toward the newly arrived cops, Sheriff Claymark and his dumb shit deputy. Fenton hated cops. Ever since the day he'd been refused a place on the force, he had decided that they were all scum. Still, on this occasion, he was pleased to see them. For the last half an hour, he had endured Hines's fawning bullshit. Question after question. Did Fenton ever get bored patrolling these grounds? Real answer, hell yeah. Actual answer, not at all, Mr. Hines. Did he feel uncomfortable with carrying that subtle, concealed firearm? What was the most violent situation he'd ever been involved with? Hines was a freak. The next time the man came up to talk, he would tell him to fuck off, job or no job. He was here to provide security, not wild stories for Clayton Hines to jerk off over. Hands reached out from the shadows of the trees behind Fenton. They seized the sides of his head so tightly that they felt automated, like production line clamps. Immense pressure caused his skull to collapse in on itself. Fenton's eyeballs dribbled down over his face like runny eggs. Jason's hand shifted from Fenton's head, roughly grabbing his torso and easily hauling the corpse back into the darkness. Less than 50 feet away, Clayton Hines extended a genial hand as he ushered Sheriff Claymark and Deputy Riger toward the hotel's entrance. Seconds after they disappeared inside, a shrill alarm bell sounded. Chapter 19. Sweet fucking Moses! I don't believe this! Not again! Chuck Whalen was talking to himself. His head jerked up from a shelf in a store cupboard, just off the sprawling kitchen area where he reigned supreme. Telltale spots of white powder remained on the shelf's lacquered wooden surface. Moistening a forefinger with his mouth, he ran it over the cocaine and then rubbed it into his gums. The fire alarm had sounded when he snorted the second of 2 5-inch lines. In his paranoid state, he had momentarily thought that his Class A drug use had in itself triggered the siren, but quickly checked himself. As neurons pinballed around his brain, Whalen yanked open the door, revealing 4 chefs standing around, looking at each other, keen to shift the blame. "Who set it off this time?" he said, Whalen. "Come on, tell me." The solution was staring him in the face. The youngest trainee, Jamie Woods, stood at a hob, eyes lowered in shame. Gray smoke was rising from his pan of burnt steak, hitting those damn ceiling sensors. The smell of roasted onions soared through the room. Wood's face reddened as all eyes descended on him. "It was me," he nodded. "Sorry, Chef." "That's right," barked Whalen. "Sorry, Chef." He felt that familiarity bitter taste at the back of his throat. Wondering whether everyone could see, he was wired to the gills. The blaring alarm echoed throughout the building. Whalen hated it with a passion. It interrupted their work and broke the whole beautiful flow of his kitchen. "How the hell did you manage to burn that shit? Where's your mind, boy?" He slapped the side of his own head to underline the point. Double doors leading toward the hotel's main restaurant burst open. Waltz Bluestone strode through, typically on the money. His eyes darted around for signs of flame, then met Whalen's gaze. "Another false alarm," he said wearily. "How wonderful." "We need to talk." Whalen held open a side door for Bluestone. As the security chief disappeared through it, Whalen ordered his chefs to regain control of the situation. He then closed the door behind him and joined Bluestone in the cold, stone-walled delivery corridor. The bigger man spoke into his walkie-talkie, giving someone the go-ahead to deactivate the alarm. "Burnt steak, yeah, this is getting real old." "It sure fucking is," said Whalen as Bluestone shut off the connection. "This new system sucks, man. I'm anticipating a lot of business tonight, in the restaurant, and then all night through room service. If the alarm keeps sounding every time there's a little smoke, we're going to hell in a handbasket. We'll be screwed. Do you understand me?" Bluestone frowned. "You high, Chuck?" Whalen stopped mid-rant. like a deep-sea diver coming up for air. Jesus! Could Bluestone hear his heartbeat? His mouth felt almost entirely numb. "Yeah, I am," he sighed. "It's a long shift, Walt." Bluestone glanced left and right along the corridor. Then he leaned in toward Wayland. The chef instinctively flinched back against the wall. "You're damn right it's a long shift," said Bluestone, eyes alert. "Tonight, I'm going to be here until at least dawn, leading the troops. Can you give me some too? It's blow, right?" Wayland rubbed his chin. He didn't have much coke left, but sorely wanted to stay on side with Bluestone, so it was worth it. Besides, Wayland's dealer was on his way with some more. "No problem," smiled the chef. "I'm happy to do you the favor." Bluestone nodded his appreciation. "Thanks, man." As Wayland pulled the coke wrap from his pocket, he checked his watch, seeing that it was later than he'd imagined. Mike Costa would be arriving shortly. Carrie Carson wrapped another fork against a glass to secure everyone's attention. The N-Trax attendees were spread around a long ballroom, which reeked of fresh paint. Yellow paint, too, for some reason. Polished off with gaudy chandeliers. It wasn't the classiest of chambers they could have chosen in which to dance the night away, but it had plenty of chairs and tables, a slick-looking DJ who spun fine tunes, and its own well-stocked bar. That last one was the real draw. Shortly after Carson had finally managed to have the lights turned down relatively low, the atmosphere had been punctured by the fire alarm's shrill, urgent blare. At first, his people paid little attention and continued to get in line for free drinks at the company's expense. Then everyone had started to wonder, was this really a drill? Maybe it was real. The hum of their speculation had died down upon hearing Carson's clinking glass. The DJ killed the music. "Okay, guys," said Carson, wondering where in the blazes Larry Brunkenheim had gone. "This may still be a drill, but the siren's gone on a while. I suggest we leave calmly through this door." As he pointed toward an arbitrarily selected exit, the fire alarm halted. A ripple of laughter and applause washed over him. "Ah, there we go," he said, racking his brains for something funny to say. "Well, I guess this is a real case of—" Music blared through the PA once again, drowning him out. Carson stood awkwardly, grinning as his underlings turned away from him, lost once again in wine and song. Tom opened the door to see a gleaming star-shaped badge, attached to a surprisingly young sheriff. Beside him was a fat man holding a shotgun, the end lowered against the carpet. Behind both was the greasy individual whom Tom remembered as being the hotel manager. "Did you call us in?" Riger asked Tom with the bluntness bordering on impatience. Claymark frowned at his subordinate. Tom nodded and opened the door wider, to reveal Halo sitting on the back of the sofa. With one look at her, Claymark and Riger seemed to understand that this was no joke. The sheriff turned to Hines. "We'll take it from here, sir," he said. "But what's going on?" Hines persisted, as though the whole thing was an inconvenience. I think I should know." "You'll know as soon as we have the information," Claymark assured him. "Now go about your business, and, as I say, we've got the ball now." Hines threw poisonous glares at Tom and especially Halo. "Absolutely, Sheriff. I should add, however, that the lady there isn't one of our guests." Claymark held him with a steady gaze. "Thank you, sir," he said pointedly. Hines walked off along the corridor, like a rocket powered by pure indignation. Tom managed a thin smile as he watched him go. "You'd better come in," he told the cops, stepping back into the suite. "Why we stopping here, Mikey?" Michael Costa ignored his dumb brother as he steered the Porsche into the Phoenix Heights grounds. The honest answer, of course, was that they were there to deliver some snow to the hotel's head chef. Johnny probably wouldn't understand what cocaine was, even if Michael told him the truth. At 18, Johnny was 7 years younger than him, not to mention twice his weight. But sometimes he genuinely suspected the kid had been born missing a gene or 3. For one thing, he was always so fucking cheerful, and he always asked questions. Worst of all, he still insisted on wearing that hat with the comedy propeller blade on top. The sooner he got Johnny hooked on mind-numbing narcotics, the better. The Porsche cruised smoothly around the back of the hotel, where golfing flags poked up from the ground like sentinels. There was only one security guard in evidence, but he simply waved the vehicle onwards, recognizing the driver as a friend of Chuck Whalen's. Everybody knew what was going on, Costa was sure. But as with all his clients, no one really gave a shit. So long as Chuck kept the kitchen running just fine, he wouldn't feel any heat from management. "Why are we stopping, Mikey?" Costa ground the Porsche to a halt, creating small explosions of gravel. "To deliver Gremlins 2, he jabbed a finger in Johnny's general direction. "You stay here for 5 minutes, all right?" Johnny frowned. "Okay, so you're delivering Gremlins 2, huh?" "That's right," Costa smiled. He slammed the car door and patted his jacket pocket as he headed off toward the hotel. "Yep, Gremlins 2, the new batch." Maybe the coke was messing with his emotions. Whalen wasn't sure, but he was starting to feel sorry for Jamie. The kitchen was once again running like clockwork, just the way it should. Still, the poor kid was looking devastated at having caused the alarm. "Look, Jamie," he said, lowering his voice as he stopped by the trainee's workstation. "You shouldn't have burnt the steak, but the fire alarm's way too sensitive. We're dealing with it. Just don't feel too bad about it, huh?" Jamie's fresh face brightened a shade as Whalen dealt him an encouraging slap on the back. "Hey," he suddenly told Jamie, lowering his voice to a whisper, "you like blow? Coke?" Jamie looked simultaneously aghast and intrigued. "Never tried it, Chef," he mumbled. There was a barely audible rap on the glass panel of the door, which led to the delivery corridor. Whalen spun around defensively, then winked conspiratorially as he registered that the newcomer was his man. Well accustomed to Michael Costa's covert visits, the other chefs paid no attention as Whalen darted over to the door. Opening it, he waggled a finger for Jamie to follow. Cheeks flushing, the young chef did as he was told. Johnny Costa wondered when Michael was going to let him see Gremlins 2. He sure loved the original. He undid his seatbelt, spun his propeller blade, and looked out across the open grounds that sprawled back behind the hotel. He drummed pudgy hands on his upper thigh, starting to hum a Guns N' Roses tune. Detecting movement out there on the golf course, he casually squinted through the windshield and saw that someone was walking over the grass. Squinting harder, he could see it was one of the hotel's security team. Someone lunged through the open window and grabbed him by the head, knocking his hat to the floor of the car. Too shocked to make a sound, Johnny scrabbled at the attacker's wrist, finding no purchase in what felt like thickly caked slime. Before he could do anything about it, some dark giant was pulling him headfirst through the window. His belly momentarily halted his exit, before an insistent wrench snapped something inside him, and he tumbled out onto the gravel, groaning loudly. Jason raised one foot into the air, then brought it down, shattering Johnny's windpipe like frail plastic. Jamie's body language betrayed his nerves. He stood against the restroom's damp wall, clutching it like a safety blanket, watching as Michael Costa used a credit card to separate piles of cocaine on the top of a closed toilet seat lid. "What's the matter, Jamie?" Whalen chuckled. "There's nothing to be afraid of here. You've had a bad night. This stuff will cheer you up." He wondered if the kid thought that he and Michael had ulterior motives and intended to molest him, here in these cramped confines. As a matter of fact, Whalen wouldn't mind having his way with Jamie. That, he knew, was the real reason why he was being so generous to the kid. Still, forced entry certainly wasn't his style, and coke never did him any favors in the bedroom department. He swallowed hard, looking forward to hoovering up his share. Costa snorted his first, using a rolled-up dollar bill of some denomination. Probably a 50, knowing Mike. Whalen sometimes thought he was in the wrong line of work. Why was he a user, not a dealer? It was pretty damn obvious who got the better quality of life. Then again, in recent months, Mike had become both. Never get high on your own supply, as the saying went. Costa vacated the cubicle, revealing 4 lines left on the toilet seat. He sniffed and gestured for Jamie to enter. "All yours, kid." Jamie hesitated. Whalen wondered again what the chef thought would happen once he entered that small space. Maybe he really was terrified of the drug. That wouldn't last. "Go on, or I'll do all 4. He grinned, pointing inside. "Fuck it," said Jamie, a smile creeping across his face. He prized himself from the wall, took the rolled-up note from Costa, and entered the cubicle, bending over the seat. "Just do 2 lines, though, huh?" laughed Waylon. "Good, kid. We'll make a junkie of you yet." "Hey, stop right there!" Jason had been striding across the golf course when the cry came from across the dimly lit grounds. The giant stopped dead and searched slowly, systematically, for the one who dared challenge him. A security guard was advancing on Jason from the shadows. While he had a gun in his hands, it wasn't pointing at the intruder. Not yet. "Could you identify yourself, please, sir?" The voice was etched with fear. Jason stood motionless, his empty hands glistening red. Getting a better look at the intruder as he drew nearer, the guard raised the gun. Grabbing a nearby golf flag, Jason wrenched its metal pole from the ground. Then he hurled it like a spear. The pole pierced the guard's stomach, emerged through his lower back, and sunk into the earth behind him. The guard spluttered, coughing blood as he leant back against the pole, sliding a few inches down it. He raised the gun again. Upon him, Jason snatched the weapon and threw it to one side. The terrified guard opened his mouth, only for it to be smothered by one of Jason's hands. Forcing his fingers between the guard's teeth and gripping hard, Jason yanked downwards. Snap! The man's lower jaw snapped off and hit the grass, followed by thick swatches of blood. Waylon enjoyed watching Jamie's face change as the drug zoomed ravenously through his system. "Goddamn, boy," he said, slapping his back. "Your whole head was lit up like a Halloween jack-o'-lantern." "Oh, whoa," said Jamie, struggling to blink. "This feels pretty immense." There followed minutes of inane babble. Waylon was used to this. It never ceased to amaze him how a topic seemed so intensely important while you were on the crest of a wave, only to fade along with the narcotic effect. No sign of it ebbing yet, he could tell. This was some good shit. Finally, Costa slapped Waylon's palm. "I gotta go," he said. "People to see." "Brains to fry," grinned Waylon. He turned to Jamie. "Let's steam back in there, huh?" "Jesus," sighed Jamie. "I'm not sure I can work like this." "The hell you can't. Now let's go." Jamie grabbed the door handle first. Then he hesitated. "You sure this stuff is safe?" he asked edgily, addressing neither of them in particular. "It's not gonna kill you, boy," said Waylon. Jamie nodded, reassured. He twisted the door handle and ducked through into the delivery corridor. Jason slapped a palm over the back of Jamie's head and propelled his face toward the wall. It splattered against the stone with a crunching squelch. "What the fuck?" yelled Costa, next out of the door. As Jamie slid down the wall, his face left a wide, wet smear of red like a paintbrush. Jason grabbed Costa by the throat and rammed 2 fat fingers into his eye sockets. The dealer struggled pointlessly against Jason's might, shrieking as blood spurted down over his face. Waylon couldn't believe what he was seeing. He looked from Jamie's corpse to Mike, who was already a lifeless rag doll in Jason's hands. This murderous freak was blocking the corridor to the outside world. As Jason threw Michael Costa to one side, the chef ran the short distance to the kitchen door and piled through it. His chefs glanced around, expecting the latest rant, drama, or both. Their casual attention turned to alarm as they saw the horror in their manager's eyes. He waved his arms madly. "Get the fuck out of here, all of you!" Okay, this has been chapters 18 and 19 of Friday the 13th, Hate, Kill, Repeat. Hope you guys are enjoying it. We're in the home stretch now, only a few more uploads to go. I think we're looking at about 90 more pages of text. Curious to see where it's going to go. Tonight I want to start something new, a little death tally for the night. So let's go over to everybody and everything that met their end in tonight's narration of Hate, Kill, Repeat. Starting with a random dick that could have been withered by the look of Van Stat. At 40 paces nonetheless. Next in line, rest in peace, one of the tires on Van Stat and Damler's car. Rest in peace, security guard Tyrone Fenton, who is never going to get ahead in his line of work now. Rest in peace, unknown cut of delicious steak, burnt at the hands of Jamie, the rookie chef. Let's have a moment of silence for that steak. Rest in peace, Kerry Carson's dignity. DJ cut him off before he could even finish his joke. He was already being laughed at by all of his peers. Bye-bye, dignity. Rest in peace, Johnny Costa, the propeller hat-wearing cliché of the dumb little brother. Well, if he had only lived a little longer and got to see Gremlins 2 finally, he would have known that he really didn't have much left to live for anyways. Rest in peace, unnamed security guard. All we can say for this guy is, Rest in peace, rookie chef Jamie. Apparently Jason was really pissed you burned his steak. And in all fairness, Waylon did tell you the drugs wouldn't kill you. He didn't say anything about the maniacal serial killer waiting outside the door wearing a hockey mask. And finally tonight, rest in peace, Michael Costa. You know, Waylon thought this guy had the life he wanted. And now he's got the death that he's running from. Let's see what happens next time. I'll be back tomorrow, guys, with some more of Hate, Kill, Repeat. Until then, this has been your friendly neighborhood 80s slasher librarian saying, thanks for listening, and remember, don't get it wet and never feed it after midnight.